for joining us for our next panel, Immigrant and Foreign-Born Artists in the New York Dance Workforce. As a friendly reminder, you are on camera. If you would like to not be on camera, you may sit in any one of the back rows. Those will not be filmed. This next session deep dives into the role of artistry in fostering the inclusion, integration, and human rights of the population of immigrants in the metropolitan area, while shaping national and global discussions about changing demographics. To start the session, please welcome Hannah Ju, Equity and Inclusion Coordinator at Dance NYC.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Amazing, great. Well, good afternoon. Like Margaret said, my name is Hannah Ju. I'm the Equity and Inclusion Coordinator at Dance NYC, and thank you so much for being part of this session. Today, Dance NYC launches a new initiative to advance immigrants, artists, and extend the role of artistry in fostering the inclusion, integration, and human rights of more than 3 million immigrants who call New York home, while shaping urgent discussions about immigrant affairs. The Immigrant Artists Initiative, developed in collaboration with a 14-person task force of immigrant artists, educators, and advocates, is iterative and sets the stage for additional action over time. We are very thankful to the Stavros Niarchos Foundation and the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation for providing leadership support for this initiative. As a part of the initiative, we have made online resources available on the Dance NYC website, and we invite you all to join us for a free day-long Immigrant Artists Conference scheduled for Friday, September 21st, 2018, hosted at the Queen's Theater and presented in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. So please save the date and stay tuned for more details. Finally, we are pleased to share early research in our new report, New York City's Foreign-Born Dance Workforce Demographics, which will ground the conversation for this session. This report offers a comprehensive assessment of the characteristics, needs, and opportunities of foreign-born dance workers, as well as key benchmarks to guide action and measure progress over time. It acts on Dance NYC's organizational commitment by mining recent survey data on the workforce of legally registered 501c3 nonprofit dance organizations and fiscally sponsored artists and projects. Findings were prepared by Dance NYC, Data Arts, and Web Management Services. As you may have already noticed, you will have a copy of the full report in your tote bags, and I'm pleased to share some of the research highlights with you now. Foreign-born New Yorkers are shockingly underrepresented in the workforce study. Only 15% of all survey respondents indicated a country of origin outside the US, compared to 37% of the city's overall population, according to census data. Nonprofit dance organizations are inconsistently and insufficiently engaging foreign-born workers. For example, there is a conspicuous scarcity of foreign-born respondents affiliated with dance education organizations. The foreign-born sponsored workforce is disproportionately challenged in identifying and accessing the resources it needs compared to the wider sponsored workforce. Foreign-born respondents rank affordable artistic development space and affordable presentation space as their highest needs, followed by living wages, affordable health care, supplies and materials, affordable living space, and affordable training. Their chief hurdle in meeting these needs is access to funding, especially individual and earned income. Less than half of foreign-born respondents report any earned income, compared to 68% of respondents born in the US. Demographic findings add a critical dimension to understanding this landscape and the relationship between the foreign-born dance workforce and the local population here in New York City. Most worrying, while the foreign-born dance workforce studied is more ethnically and racially diverse than the wider dance workforce, it is significantly less diverse than the wider foreign-born population, underscoring patterns of exclusion. Only 5% of foreign-born nonprofit respondents and 8% of foreign-born sponsored respondents identify as disabled, which are smaller than the percentages of disabled respondents born in the US and out of step with the overall percentage of foreign-born disabled New Yorkers. More promising, the foreign-born workforce studies skews female, with 72% of nonprofit respondents and 84% of sponsored respondents identifying as female, outpacing the wider dance workforce and local foreign-born population, which is 53% female. The percentages of foreign-born dance workers identifying as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer are substantial at 14% or more across all samples. And while indicating opportunity to better engage aging populations born before 1945, the findings on age generally align with the city's population, which tends to skew young. The report offers 6 recommendations to advance the foreign-born dance workforce that are intended to apply across a wide range of stakeholders, from dance makers and companies to policymakers, funders, and service providers. First, it advocates a greater role for the workforce in diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts already underway in the creative sector, including Create NYC, the City of New York's New Cultural Plan, and also the development of new targeted activities based on survey findings. For example, efforts both to engage New Yorkers from countries underrepresented in the study sample and to foster ethnic and racial equity. Second, the study recommends resources and training geared to nonprofit dance organizations to correct for identified gaps in employment, particularly at dance education and large budget organizations, and gaps in membership within board and volunteer groups. Third, it articulates goals for raising the overall level and efficacy of funding across sources, from refreshing government and foundation grant programs and educating individual donors to offering the workforce training focused on generating earned income. Fourth, the report encourages meeting critical space needs through both the creation of new spaces and the increased use of existing spaces for existence by expanding space subsidy programs. Fifth, it proposes addressing the need for living wages by tackling systemic barriers such as funding requirements that limit administrative overhead, and by empowering employers and employees to collaborate on solutions. Sixth, the report recommends undertaking comprehensive research to assess the landscape of foreign-born New Yorkers engaging in dance outside the traditional 501c3 and fiscal sponsored models, which are the foundation of this early analysis, but may be limiting in our approach. Foreign-born artists are active in many different informal settings that are often off the radar of most data collectors. So with that, I am pleased to introduce our moderator for the session, Julie Koo, who is Vice President of TDC, who we have engaged to lead a second research report to canvass existing government and private sector data sources and surface new learning about immigrant dance and dance education organizations, artists, students, and audiences. Julie is here today with 4 members of our Immigrant Artists Task Force, whose leadership and guidance has made this work possible, and I'm very happy that other members of our task force are also in the audience here with us today. Thank you for your guidance and support, and please join me in welcoming our panel.
Welcome. Thanks so much for setting aside this time to talk about immigrant dance makers. I think the thing that I have learned in embarking on this research study over the past few months is that it's very complicated to think about immigrant dance makers. There are a lot of factors that affect people's personal lives that are building on in the public sphere today. So, for example, it affects a person's legal status, and which directly impacts their own freedom and personal rights. It affects, or it has something to do with how a person conceives of him or herself. But then at the same time, there are also assumptions kind of thrown at a person about their immigration status based on how they look, the accent that they have when they speak. And then at the same time, there's also a lot to do with culture that comes with being an immigrant, and that can directly impact your artistry as a dance maker. And I think what I've also learned in speaking with our panelists that different foreign-born dance makers experience all of these factors in different ways, and so there is not one immigrant story that we have to tell here on immigrant dance makers. And then added to all that level of complexity at the personal level is just the deeply disturbing debate and policy making on immigration that's happening right now as we speak. So because of all this complexity, I think we found that it is really challenging to gather data about immigrant dance makers, and so it's really commendable for Dance NYC to embark on this research, especially because the population here in New York City is so heavily immigrant. I believe the stats are about 40% foreign-born folks, and then when you add on their kids, it's 60% of people are first or second generation immigrants here in the city, so it's clearly an issue that's very salient. Our goals for the panel today are to hear about those different experiences from 4 very different immigrant dance makers, foreign-born dance makers here at the table. And also we would love to start a conversation about how to galvanize those recommendations that Hannah just ran through. I'm particularly interested in learning how immigrant dance makers themselves want to get engaged in that discussion. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and give us kind of their 5-minute origin story about their experience here in the United States as a dance maker, whether they've experienced any obstacles as they've come here, and whether you've seen new opportunities in that experience come to a different place in your artistry or in your lives. So why don't I start with Pontus?
All right, it's working. It's working. My name is Pontus, and I'm an American since 2 years. I got my green card in 2010, and I became a citizen in 2016. Partly because I felt unsure of, what was going to happen. If I had to leave for some reason, would I be welcome back? And I wanted to vote. So I came here originally in 2009, and I am Swedish. I'm from Stockholm. And first of all, I'd like to say that, I definitely feel that I am a white male with a lot of privilege, and that is just how it is. I am very aware of it. Having said that, I come from a quite insular city. Stockholm is very small, and the dance world is, tiny, and the ducks go round and round in a very small pond. And Sweden is a country that receives a lot of immigrants, but integration is a huge problem, and Stockholm is way more segregated than New York. And the dance world is incredibly segregated. It's just not, it's just tiny. So I wanted to be in a city of the world and a city of other people. And as such, New York is, in my eyes, a city that just offers the possibility of coexisting with everybody at the same time. So, I came here, and one of the benefits that I saw also is that when you come to a new place, people's preconceived notions of who you are and what you do are kind of, if not absent, different. That's incredibly refreshing, I think, as an artist, because that means I'm doing what I do and not kind of put in a box according to how people perceive me as I grew up. And throughout the years that I've been around, there's a lot of opinion about who I am and that I might not agree with. So in that way, it's been incredibly refreshing to come here. And I suppose, one of the, coming here to be part of this talk, I felt like, well, I'm a bit nervous because I don't know what I can contribute in terms of giving some kind of advice or recommendations of how to be an immigrant in New York, right? I just kind of figured it out. And the truth is, I've never felt that I've always felt that it's been possible to adapt to the situation, as opposed to it being possible to change the situation. So basically, you know, immigration to America is very difficult, and but you know, why even have an opinion? I mean, it's like my opinion doesn't matter. All I can do is try to navigate the system and make it work, which I did. I mean, partly, I don't know if it's luck or maybe a mix. And the same thing with just accessing funding and opportunities and being able to work here. I just started trying to learn how it works and try to adapt and try to find my way through New York. And luckily, it's very big. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of dance being made here, different kinds of possibilities and opportunities. I mean, they're limited also, but there are many various ones, and I just started navigating the system. And I have, somehow managed to do that. In terms of making a living, I still have to go back to Europe sometimes to make work. I mean, to make commissions. I couldn't live on what I do here solely. But, am I reaching my 5 minutes? Probably. Well, let's continue later.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's interesting that you're going back to Europe to make money, and that the assumptions that people make of you are different, because I think that might be different for people of color who are immigrants.
I could just add one thing. There's a myth that there's funding in Europe, and that's partly true and partly not true. It's accessible to some.
Hi, Katie Brown. I wonder if you can tell us your story.
Hi, my name is Kiki, but you can say Kiki, it's easier. I'm from New Zealand, and I've been living in New York for 4 years. So I used to work for the government for New Zealand, and then I came here on a holiday and I kind of fell in love with New York, so I quit my job and moved here 6 months later. I did that thing where you have a holiday romance, and then you move in with them, and then you realize you have to do your laundry and learn how the subway works. So it was, but I have a background in dance. I was a founding member of Touch Compass, which is the first mixed ability dance company in New Zealand. So I grew up dancing, and then I went back to school and went to performing arts school and stuff. And so where am I going with this? I guess I moved to New York with specific intentions to be an artist, and I kind of researched what kind of visa I had to get, and kind of tried to get a visa that had a longevity that could kind of turn into an immigration visa. So I've just got my artist visa, which means I can stay here for another 3 years. So so I came here to actually do art school because it felt like an easier thing. I tried to look at if I could come here and dance for a dance company, but I couldn't find any integrated dance companies, and now I know where they are, but actually a Google search didn't help me. And I don't think you'll find me in any, it's kind of embarrassing to be part of the task force and be here, but I'm actually not in any of the findings. I am that immigrant dancer, disabled person that you're not going to find, that you're trying to find. And then I've been making visual art, and then I've been doing some writing, and then I went to a workshop, and I'm half Samoan, so Samoan, another Samoan artist recommended that I apply for a performance project, and so I did, and then through that I met another dancer, a disabled dancer, and so I've been, I feel like a dancer who's come out of retirement, so I feel like a creaky old lady who's coming back after a 20-year break, and I've been dancing again in New York for the last year and a half, so I feel like very much like an outsider in this conversation, and I have accessed some grants, but other people have written them. I've kind of been part of the company. I feel like one thing that I found moving here was you're trying to figure out the system, and then you spend a lot of the time like assuming that grants and fellowships aren't for you. So I know that's something that we've kind of talked about. And even this identity of being an immigrant is very new to me because I didn't think of myself as an immigrant. And I think I'm very privileged in that way too. I come from an English-speaking country, and a country that when you say you're from New Zealand, no one ever says that's a bad thing, you know. And so I have a lot of privilege with that. And yeah, kind of lost my train of thought, but yeah, so even the word immigrant has been one that I've kind of chosen to identify, and that's something that we've been talking about too, trying to find people who self-identify, because I applied for the New York Foundation for the Arts Immigrant Artists program, but I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't read their definition, and through reading that I was like, oh, I am an immigrant, but I know too that my family find that a very strange label to give to yourself, and they don't enjoy it. So just even identifying as an immigrant, it's something that I don't think I need to, but I want to, and especially in this political climate, I think it's important that we choose those identities. Yeah.
All right, Candace Thompson.
Hi everyone. So I'm Candace Thompson, and I've been in New York now for 15 years. I first came here from Trinidad to pursue dance at a tertiary level because it didn't exist in Trinidad and Tobago when I was growing up studying. I started studying modern and ballet in Trinidad and then came here to continue doing that. And so I left with the sole purpose of like, I'm gonna go to America, I wanna be a modern dancer, I wanna be on big stages, like that was my dream. And that has morphed as the longer that I've stayed. But from graduating college, you know, the process of getting your O1 visa and figuring out how that works. So I would feel like that, I would say that that was probably the first major obstacle, was not figuring out the visa process. And then figuring out how to get the resources to pay for the visa process. I did a piece in 2015 with the company I used to dance, company I still dance for, Sydney Mostly Dances, that was called Body Business. And in the piece, I talk about the fact that I've spent close to $30,000 on immigrant fees, on legal fees, staying in the country for all this time. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's the first thing is figuring out what the process is for you, and then figuring out how to, you know, afford legal fees, or, you know, maybe you can find, there are people who've been able to find cheaper options, but that wasn't the case for me. So there's, you know, that's one major obstacle. And then I think the other, well, not obstacle, I get that this is true for any dance maker in New York, is like figuring out where you fit in with your skills, your abilities, and your interests. Luckily for me, leaving college, I had a professor that sort of mentored me and led me to a lot of opportunities that eventually led me to sort of where I am now, which is running something called Dance Caribbean Collective, which is something I started 3 years ago as well, to build community and support around Caribbean, either immigrant, you know, people who identify as Caribbean in their heritage, who make concert dance work. And so once I started shifting into choreographing, it became really, really clear that my choreographic voice or artistic voice wasn't openly supported anywhere. But I knew other choreographers who were making work from a Caribbean perspective that were also looking for support and audience and opportunities and resources. And so that's how Dance Caribbean started. One thing that I will say, I guess, is a plus, is that because I sort of didn't really have a good sense, well, like a large sense of how, you know, nonprofit structures work and how presenting organizations work, I was just like, we're doing this. I need to get these dancers on stage, and I need to find a way to get this done. And so not knowing is the thing I think that has allowed us to get this far. Because if I really knew what I was getting myself into, I would have probably been like, no, let me go do something else. And in galvanizing support around DCC, a lot of people who were born here, you know, some of them have Caribbean parents who so they're like first or second generation immigrants. They were like, yeah, look, we people who've been here, like who've grown up in the scene in New York, who are Caribbean, like, yeah, we've always talked about doing something like this, but no one ever sat down and did it. So it sort of takes someone from outside with a different perspective to be like, oh, look, this whole area is missing. Let's create something that can fill that need. Let's see. Was there anything else I wanted to say? No, I think that's it.
So Candace, when you came, so it sounds like your dream was to be a modern contemporary dancer in New York. Was bringing in the Caribbean aspect a part of the motivation when you got here, or is that something that developed later?
So that developed later. I grew up doing Graham and Horton. So that was, and my teacher studied at Juilliard and Ailey, so those were the things that I had in my mind when I first came here. But coming here, it's like the thing that when you leave home, is like that's the thing that you think about all day. So it's like, one, it's like because I missed home, like creating work around it was sort of how I stayed connected. But then two, I think that I just saw so many ways that I could bring in Caribbean culture to concert dance work that could make my work function sort of in a place that there was nothing happening there. So I guess up until that point too, I never saw myself as a choreographer because I'm like, well, what do I have to say? Like, everything has sort of been done until I got to that place where I was like, oh, if I put these two things together, I do have a unique perspective. So.
Oh, so you weren't a choreographer when you came either?
No, I was just doing tilts and flatbacks.
Wow. Thanks. That's great. Thank you, Candace. Nora.
So when I agreed to be part of the task force, one of the reasons I agreed to it was the fact that American dance, as we know it, has been largely influenced by immigrants anyway. And so Balanchine, Baryshnikov, you can go on and on and on and on. A lot of important people have come here and built what is this American dance. And including those Americans who are native born, whether they be Graham, were also largely impacted by foreign ideas. So I agreed to be part of the task force because I think I see myself as part of a very long ritual of contributing to American ideas by people who come from other places. I think I've been in the scene long enough that everybody knows I'm Zimbabwean, I'm African. I doubt that the surveys would actually locate me anywhere. So really, I'm just particularly interested in people who make ideas in any time zone and feel free enough and capable enough to take on any challenge in any place and make the work that is their conviction that is relevant.
Well, thank you so much for each telling us a bit about yourselves and your experience here in the US and kind of also about the motivation. And it sounds like each of you has had something different to say about that. Now, one of the things that I think was found in the study is that there's a disparity between foreign-born dance makers who are fiscally sponsored, accessing the resources that they need to do their work, and between them and US-born dance makers. The stat is 4% of foreign-born fiscally sponsored can find the resources, while 10% US can, so it's less than half. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about what are the needs that immigrants need to thrive in the dance world in New York. One thing that I'd say is my impression was it may not be that different from what any dancer needs, but I wonder if you guys can kind of give your take on that.
Right, so I agree. I don't think, I mean, basically the needs are the same. But culturally, where I come from, for example, individual giving is just non-existent. It was a whole new world that I had to just learn. And it's still, like the study says, that's not one of my strengths. So as compared to foundational support, I get very little individual support.
Okay.
But it's also like not in my, I mean, it takes a lot for me to change my being to approach individual giving. It's just not part of my culture at all. And my fiscal sponsor has not been really able to help me with that.
Okay, so in kind of getting you even acclimated to the idea of how to ask people for money. I mean, I think a lot of people have problems asking people for money, but
it's difficult for everybody.
Yes, it is difficult for everyone, but there's clearly a disparity, and I think you're pointing to the fact that I think I've learned this in other fields in Europe that that's not a thing, and then they look to the U.S. as the place where they know how to do that. So, okay, thank you. Any other thoughts from other folks about resources and asking them, accessing them?
I think when you're an outsider, it's hard to think, like I previously said before, that it's for you, and I think that it's really hard to ask for help and then to assume. I think there's a lot of barriers just assuming that you can apply for something. You just kind of automatically discount yourself. I think a lot of my friends and peers don't even look at institutions as a path, and that's why I think a lot of the time things happen outside because you just you don't really understand what the structure is or assume it's for you, and I think that's one thing that could change.
Wait, so are you saying that, so I think some of the stuff that the study showed was about fewer immigrants in different institutions, so it may not necessarily be about kind of active exclusion, but just that you don't go there, like you don't consider those things for you.
Yeah, my visa, I think I'm classified as a non-immigrant alien. So I think like all of my paperwork is always telling me that I'm not, like I don't really have status, and I think that's one thing that I've really learned being in America is that I have a very tenuous status. So I think that kind of attitude and identity means that I don't think about myself relating to big structures or institutions, and I'm always being told that I'm not part of that, and I'm over here. So I think that's just part of my attitude, but it's changing. But the first couple of years I did kind of hide so that I wouldn't like get into trouble, kind of,
Yeah. A huge barrier.
Yeah.
More, are you smiling?
I guess I want to own up to the fact that I'm actually a really successful artist. Can I just say that? And part of it is that I just have not felt to be outside of any system and fearlessly done what every other New York dance artist is doing, which is go for it, and then also just make work that is fundable. So I feel like I have to acknowledge that, because to not would be to do a great deal of disservice that it hasn't. I don't think I'm here because of my outsider status. I think I'm here because of my ability to disregard my outsiderness.
So you're part of the 4%?
Yeah.
All right. Any other, so beyond just kind of having the fearlessness to go after it, do you have any other thoughts about were there things that you had to learn about the U.S. system from the start that kind of gave you the access to understand what is fundable? What is fundable dance?
Perhaps I arrived with a great deal of hubris anyway. And that was not American made.
And America did not beat it out of you?
No. And in fact, that I could pass as a black person. Perhaps that added to the hubris. That I never felt myself to be, I didn't stand out. Necessarily, and even when I was identified as not being American, that did not hurt me because I am African, and and I'm referring to the African American community, which has a deep love, I think, for Africa, and so perhaps I'm very singular in this experience that I've really fallen into already an existing history.
Yeah.
And I have really benefited from work that has been done, continues to be done by African Americans, and I have benefited as a black woman. And I also don't want to hide from that, and that the work that I bring to the table also brings a certain rigor. And perhaps it's of its time.
Wait, so are you saying that the dance you were making came out of the box, kind of fitting into what is fundable in the United States because of the training and the rigor that you brought to it from the start?
Well, I was just never in a box. Really, I would say that my work is experimental. And that I think there is a sliver of population that is keen on that.
Absolutely.
Experimental work. And that perhaps it's remained relevant to those funders. And, I'm a hard worker as well.
So, great. And you really, one of a quandary for me in the research that I'm doing on immigrant dance organizations is trying to suss out African American companies, because that's not immigration. If your family came here because they were kidnapped and brought here as slaves, but there is this complication where some of those companies are really embracing African diaspora, and so that is about immigrants. So thank you for illuminating that. Candice, any thoughts about resources?
I feel like besides like the general navigating the dance world, there's also like general life resources, like how do you apply to get an apartment?
Yes.
How, you know what I mean?
Because it doesn't work the same way.
Right, exactly. Like if your landlord's giving you trouble, like do you have resources? Like is there someone you can call? Like general, like how do you fill out your taxes the first time? Like the life things of managing the U.S. system, I think, were one of the biggest learning curves.
Was it for you getting access to the knowledge just kind of informal trial and error, or did you feel like there was a place that you could go to get some knowledge?
Trial and error, I think. Asking people, for sure. But, so, there's also the thing about, do you know which questions to ask?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, if it's everything.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a solution to that one, but.
Oh, so if there were some sort of welcome wagon.
Maybe, yeah.
Here's how you do X, Y, Z.
These are the things.
These are the things, yeah. Well, I wonder if
Julie, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask all the panelists to make sure your mics are a little closer so that our audience members can hear better. Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, no problem. So I wanted to turn to the recommendations, and here I understand that we certainly don't have all the answers up here, so I welcome contribution from the audience. Yes, thank you very much for putting that back up there. So what can be There's a lot of great ideas up here, some of them having to do with systemic change, and some of them having to do with immigrant dance makers kind of getting involved in the discussion and the advocacy. And I wonder if the panel, and I might open it up here to the audience as well, like how can we make this happen? What are some concrete steps that we can take to get on some of the stuff here?
I have a lot of thoughts about this. Well, because, basically I've gone from being more of a performing artist and choreographer to also being in charge of a presenting organization, or advocacy organization, both. So like that's a whole new learning curve. Like, how do you fundraise? How do you structure your organization? How do you fiscal sponsorship? Like the whole audience engagement, marketing, social media, like the whole thing. And a lot of these recommendations talk about getting immigrant artists involved in the nonprofit world. And also getting them resources that they need to basically provide their skills, or get their skills to their community. Because it's both, right? It's engaging immigrants and also supporting immigrant artists. So one is, I guess, getting that kind of training, people who show interest in leadership, so getting them those skills. And then also, if you are saying that you definitely need immigrants at the table at your large cultural institution that has budgets of $5 to $10 million, then in a way they need more resources than the average person that you would hire, because I feel like for instance, if I were to go into those shoes, like I can't afford to work for $30,000 a year. Like that is the case in a lot of nonprofits. Like I can't do that. So if you need our skills too, then that also comes with a different level of investment on the individual level. So yeah, okay, I'll probably do it.
I think one thing that's interesting about your story, Candace, is that since you didn't feel like you had these recommendations in action when you came, you kind of built it yourself.
Right.
And so are you saying that, offer that maybe some of this is about offering the training to other people to kind of do what you did, to build up your own structures?
Yes, build up your own structures, or fit into existing structures. I guess it's just a sense that getting those skills to be able to use what you have on a larger scale. And then, but again, if our demographic is needed on the larger scale, on the policy making scale, then there needs to be some investment, or I guess like pipelining, whatever the word is, to get us to that place. But just know that the stakes are higher for us, right? Like some of us have to send money back home, like, you know what I mean? Like we can't be here hanging out. So,
Are native born dance makers not having to create similar infrastructures and figure out how to navigate? So what makes the foreign born most special in this very particular dance ecology, which is already a very tiny pond anyway?
Well, I think what the study shows is there are disparities between immigrant dance artists and US-born ones for whatever reasons.
Yes, I got that, but who wants to, is it the immigrants asking for support, or is it Dance NYC, or is it the city trying to do something? Like, is this an immigrant-driven initiative?
Well, I think that's a great question to ask. There's clearly, the city has voiced a priority to make sure that immigrants have access to arts opportunities and that immigrant artists are supported. But I asked you guys. I mean, it's hard for any dancer out there. And when you hear these recommendations, a lot of them kind of apply to any kind of independent artist. So I don't know if you guys want this. Like,
I mean, the thing I would say is just that we're, you know, like if you want to bring up the term intersectionality, like we're at the nexus of like several oppressing structures, right? So yes, I feel like yes, if you are saying that the immigrants that are present in New York City matter and that their voices should be heard at larger policy making, larger cultural decisions, then yes, provision needs to be made so that we have a seat at the table, so that our voices are heard, and so that those things trickle down into communities. But yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that in our meetings we've kind of talked about what does the word immigrant mean, and who qualifies as an immigrant, and I feel like a lot of the time expanding that definition to include first generation or second generation immigrants makes sense. It isn't just the first wave, but children of parents who have immigrated, because they also, as you were saying, they have a lot of structural inequalities too that immigrants face. So I think, yeah, my idea of an immigrant isn't just me. It's you know, the generation after me or the generation before me. And I think that wider definition and inclusion of immigrant kind of answers, I think, some of the questions that you're asking.
Candace, any thoughts? Do you want this?
I'm so confused.
Oh.
I'm seriously confused. I'm sorry. Can you hear me? I'm confused because I'm from the Caribbean. And where we come from, all of us have 10 jobs. It's not that we always ask for handout. We know how to work to get there. So I'm a little confused. I hear what you're saying. Nothing is easy for anyone unless you're born into privilege. So let's just get over that already. Okay. If you want to have a dance studio, save your money and buy a house, make the bottom area your dance studio, rent it out. I'm a little confused. Tenacity, I'm so confused. I'm hearing things and I'm still confused. This is New York City. We are privileged in a way that we can knock on as many doors or build our own doors. We could go to radio stations, block parties. I mean, I'm saying it's a lot of work, but we're artists, that's what we do. I mean, I'm confused. I'm very confused.
But I think that's why I posed the question, whose agenda is this? You know, all artists are here to do what they will. Wherever they land, they will do their work.
Exactly.
So it's, yeah.
Like Baba Chuck always says, why are we always asking for a handout? Build your building. I'm just, you know, and I understand what we're saying, and I know we're behind a lot because we just come here, you know, but there's one thing about people. If we want something, we'll work through it, we'll get through it. You understand what I'm saying? I'm a little confused. But I do appreciate.
Well, I didn't come here behind.
Oh, no. Only that, we.
You know, yeah, so nobody's behind. We're all exactly where we need to be.
Well, the whole idea about slaves, you know, coming over here being enslaved, yeah, some of us were here before slavery. So let's get our history right, please. That whole mentality keeps a lot of us down in that head. We're not. We can do and become anything we want to, just put the work in. Yeah, I'm confused.
And I would just also, I'm a dance artist in New York City, identify as a Black woman. I'm from Texas, I'm from a working class family, my parents were janitors. So moving to New York City, a lot of these things that the support people need is very similar, and I think there's interesting where does class cut across this, because I imagine there might be artists who are foreign born that come with a certain class that allows them to navigate. And I might be equivalent coming from a working class family in like a rural area in the South. I might be equivalent in resources to somebody who is an immigrant who's also coming from a place that doesn't have that same amount of resources. So, and moving the world as a Black woman. So I think that I'm interested to know also how class is embedded into this. I know, I realize we just have a microphone that's just wondering.
Go for it.
I just want to bring up the visa issue and that being fundamental, and that understanding that as a group of people that need a certain amount of attention, which as someone who has been fortunate to be on the O1 visa, realizes that the dance community is able to serve better than actually a lot of other communities, maybe because of the ecology or the small size or the level of camaraderie, that I've been fortunate to receive support from people in being able to get this visa. So there's already a good foundation for the work that I believe is being done, and I think making that a place to start is important.
I was born and raised in Greece. I immigrated here in 1994. I did not think I was immigrating. Years later, I'm realizing, yes, I'm an immigrant. I did do everything by myself. No one supported me from Greece or here. I have a privileged story. I came with a Fulbright, which means I had money for a couple of years. I worked hard. I presented my work. I worked for a cultural organization as well, and supporting the downtown community, and I'm very happy about that. About the recommendations, these are recommendations for everyone, but regardless, I'm very happy we're talking about how to support immigrants and immigrant artists here, because there is something, there's always the feeling of otherness. Yes, some of us will always feel other. The feeling of otherness is always like around for different reasons. Because they don't understand you, because you don't understand the language. Because when you enter JFK, they might take you to the little room and ask you questions and look at your cell phone. Because you might not know. I was able to navigate. Other people are not. Other people are scared and terrified and staying in their rooms and in hotels, and until we find a way, someone to tell them. Now the question is, if it's so hard, why do you come? Well, because first of all, my country has no financial support, because my country has fallen apart, or because my ideas are not accepted, or because I want to move forward with my form, for many other reasons. So I personally just want to voice that, because yes, there are different levels of being privileged and not being privileged, of being accepted, not being accepted. Networks, it's accessibility to networks. Networks of support are the ones that we need. And again, I was one of the personalities that I came here with a Fulbright. I had the money through the scholarship, and I easily through the academic world and navigated my way. But not everyone is like that. And I still need help, although I've been so privileged. So, that's all. Thank you.
Well, while the mic is moving around, I just want to say, hello.
Oh, hi. Go ahead, please.
That I would say, again, one of the reasons I agreed to be on the panel is because I am already part of a very unique Africa underground. That I am really responsible for stabilizing and helping those African artists who come to New York because they know they can find me. You know, and what I would like to be able to do, I don't know whether Dance NYC or the Immigration Department and the City Hall is interested in beefing up my infrastructure so that I'm in a better position to help those people who, some of them, yes, have to fish out of JFK for whatever reason. But, you know, I think part of the reason why we've been gathered here is because we do have a sphere of influence, even if it's small.
Hi. Hello. My name is Fadi Khouri. I'm the artistic director of FJK Dance, a contemporary dance company here in New York. I come from Iraq. I'm an American now, and I was an immigrant, refugee, 9 years ago. And my partner is from Turkey, Celine Chavika. And I just want to say that my experience coming here was wanting to be a dancer from Iraq, from Lebanon, and having the opportunity to learn, to study, and to be the artist that I want, until I needed to create and to have my own voice. And what I want to say is, from the outside, what's in New York is the opportunity, and what's in the US in general is, in my case, the peace and the possibility of creating your own path. And so I did that, and I found a way, but I'm similar to many Americans that come from other states. So I think in developing the company, the first part of it was for me to integrate and to adapt to the American identity within me. What I did as an American created the American dance company that I have. And the legacy that we can create belongs to everyone in the company that comes from all different backgrounds that work in New York and create in New York. And in the first part, I couldn't really accept the classification of me being an immigrant or I'm an Iraqi artist, because deep inside, I just wanted to be human, and I just wanted to be recognized for my art. But in the past year, I noticed that there's a need for representation for a lot of the Arabic community. I realize I'm the only Iraqi choreographer in the US who's ambitious enough to deal with this process. But I think it's not fair to be classified as an immigrant when you are doing your work as an artist, similar to any other artist. But perhaps programs like this initiative can provide a venue where diversity is recognized and humanity is recognized, as opposed to the class of different immigrants in the US.
Thank you. I have a little bit of a different perspective. I think everyone in this room is here because they've already mastered something of the system. They wouldn't be here otherwise. And I'm native born, but I have a company of 25 immigrant dancers, all of them, and 15 immigrant theater people, and 15 immigrant singers, Georgian, all of them. And not one of them would be able to navigate the system. Some of them have tried, but not in their ethnic arts. One of them is a ballet dancer, and he's got a certain amount of success. One of them is an opera singer, he has a certain amount of success, but none of them, they don't speak English, the ethnic group that I'm representing. And I'm sure none of them answered this questionnaire because none of them were approached. The only one possibly was me. And if I answered it, I would say I'm not an immigrant, because I'm not. So there's no way for this particular ethnic group to be represented by this process, even though I think it's a very important process. So I don't know exactly how to proceed with this, but I would love it if we could be part of the conversation as well. We're a different aspect of the immigrant arts community.
Thank you. Okay, all right, we'll fit in a couple more here.
So
So what I wanted to say was related to that, and it is actually a question that relates to the recommendations. I too am confused for different reasons, but I feel like for the most part, with all due respect to all of your stories and your amazing work, you have all self-selected to come to this country as choreographers, as artists. There are a lot of people who came here fleeing their lives, and they have cultures, they were artists back in their countries. So I guess related to what you were saying, and then also related to these recommendations, especially number 6, which it seems like is probably eventually going to get more of these informal communities that might not know the language or have access to these resources. With the data that exists, is there a way to separate between people who've come here as choreographers, who came here for the artistic opportunity, versus people who came here as, it sounds strange to say like fleeing for their lives, but is there a way to break down between like the self-selection?
No, not at this point. Not at this point. So I think that is one thing that I've learned, that there's going to have to be a lot of primary research done to really get a definitive answer about some of these things.
Great. I really appreciate this conversation and the dialogue and all of the work that you're doing. I'm a second-generation immigrant, and I also run a nonprofit. And my parents brought me to a place where theory is amazing. I have a PhD, but action steps are really important to get things done. So when I look at this list of recommendations, I see 1, 2, and 5, because I start to say, like, what can I do as a nonprofit director to try to include more immigrants into my workplace? And I would say 1, 2, and 5, for the last 5 years, we have not been able to figure out the visa thing. We've had lawyers, we've had people working for the State Department on our board. The amount of paperwork to fill out that visa is like this, and the amount of money for an immigrant, plus for the organization. So action steps, really concrete. My ask to you is there a place that we can go to find this information in a way that is, you don't have to hire a lawyer that actually is going to give you bad information probably anyway, which is what we found out from the State Department after we spent $5,000, but a real clear, concrete way to help immigrants kind of get work in the United States, because we want to work with different immigrants from different countries. So I'm looking at number 1, I'm looking at number 2, that's that address organizational barriers to advance foreign-born dance workers. That's, I mean, how do you get through the visa process? So I don't know if there's something with your stories that would be really concrete, but that's not like this 2,000-page, document that people have to go through. I also look at, like number 5, improve wages for foreign-born dance workers, and I think that's the question that's going on. It's not just what all of us are trying to figure that out. And the bigger issue, as someone who's running a nonprofit, is as you're increasing just wages in general, and we all want the minimum wage to go up, it's killing the nonprofits who can't afford that. So that reality of like, how does the funding support the interest to increase the wages for the smaller nonprofits? And of course, I know that's a bigger conversation than this, but that also has to, kind of be looked at as well. So concrete action steps would be huge and useful, even if it's just like, go to this website, call this person, but these are concrete people. Don't say, call this lawyer, and they'll help you after they take your $20,000 and you don't have anything.
Thank you so much. I think this has been a really lively conversation. Nora, thank you so much for injecting some really great questions.
I just want to say I'm with you there. This is why I'm here. Yeah. That I also, I'm working with a lot of foreign-based artists who are kick-ass. The world needs to know. I am constantly in visa processes, and one of my suggestions was just that. Where is the data bank? Where are the resources that all of us could actually go for, whether it's the city or whether it's individual artists? So hopefully Dance NYC is not just going to just make us, sit here and talk, and actually just do something.
Great. Thank you to all of the panel for participating.